Today, I want to talk about how the Savior Jesus Christ ministers and what we can learn from his example. I will share a few scriptures that illustrate his pattern of ministering and discuss what they can teach us. Since ministering has been such a major topic in the church recently, I thought it would be worth looking at the way the Savior lifted others while he was here on the earth. So, first, let's look at the Savior's conversation with Nicodemus in John chapter 3. Nicodemus was one of the chief leaders among the Jewish people during Christ's life, and someone who understood the scriptures and the importance of their teachings. The teachings that Christ shared were viewed by many in the community as radical and sacrilegious. Nicodemus was one of the only Jewish leaders who seems to accept Christ's teachings and recognize who he really is. In John chapter 3, we read, "The same came to Jesus by night and said unto him, Rabbi, we know that thou art a teacher come from God, for no man can do these miracles that thou doest, except God be with him." Here, Nicodemus is able to listen to Jesus with an open heart because he knows the Savior's purpose, and he knows that he was sent by God. Think how differently this chapter would play out if Nicodemus did not trust the Lord. But because he trusts Jesus, he is led to seek greater understanding from him and question him by saying, "How can these things be?" I believe to minister effectively, our ministering families still need to know we are assigned by the bishop or branch president to lift them. It shouldn't be a secret that we're their ministers, so that they know, as Nicodemus knew of Jesus, that we have been sent by God and that our purpose is to do his work in their lives. Elder Oaks has said, "It is good to visit the families we are assigned to. It is better to have a brief visit in which we teach doctrine and principle. And it is best of all to make a difference in the lives of some of those we visit." I think we will be more successful as ministers if we show our families that we are there to help them and we are there to serve them in any way they need. Second, let's look at the Savior's encounter with the sick woman who had an issue of blood. In Mark chapter 5, Jesus has just been approached by a ruler of the synagogue named Jairus, whose daughter is on the verge of death. This man has enough faith in his Savior to say, "My daughter lieth at the point of death, but come and lay thy hand upon her, and she shall live." In Matthew, Jairus says his daughter is already dead, but we can assume that by this point there was nothing anyone else could do to save her, and we can get a sense for the urgency that Jairus felt at this moment when he comes to the Savior. Jesus follows Jairus back to his house, and on the way he is pressed by people in the crowded streets and alleyways. Among all this commotion, Jesus notices one person, a woman whose name is not given in any of the accounts, who has had an issue of blood for 12 years. We also learn that this woman had spent every penny she had and has gone through quite a lot of torment trying to get herself healed, but has had no success. When she sees that Jesus is passing by, she, like Nicodemus, knows who he really is, and she says within herself, if I may but touch his garment, I shall be whole." Jesus immediately says, "Someone hath touched me, for I perceive that virtue has gone out of me." We can tell that this woman never wanted to disrupt the Master, for she immediately comes forward trembling and tells the Lord that she has touched him and been healed. Now, Jesus could have just said, "Oh, well, that's good for you," and left to continue with his mission to visit Jairus' daughter. Instead, he takes the time to stop with this woman and talk with her. He refers to her as daughter and provides her with comfort, saying, "Thy faith is what made thee whole." After this, he continues on to Jairus' house and raises his daughter from the dead. But I want to focus more on what he did with this woman. Elder Uchtdorf said a few years ago in General Conference, "I think of Jesus Christ in his short life among his people. I have tried to imagine him bustling between meetings or multitasking to get a list of urgent things accomplished. I can't see it. Instead, I see the compassionate, caring Son of God purposely living each day. When he interacted with those around him, they felt important and loved. He knew the infinite value of the people he met. He blessed them, ministered to them, he lifted them, healed them. He gave them the precious gift of his time." For Jesus, it would have been really easy for him to just leave this woman without a second thought, but he took the time to minister to her in her hour of need, even when his other responsibilities were rather pressing. Someone's life was even on the line. This is a challenge that all of us face as we try to find time to minister to our families, but as Elder Holland said recently, we all have time, It's just about how we choose to prioritize it. I think we can also note how a virtue went out of Jesus when she touched him, and that virtue was what she had needed from him. The people we minister to will need the same from us. It won't always be to heal them, but how can we minister like the Savior if we aren't clean? How can the Spirit guide us if we are not worthy and prepared? I think all of God's children deserve clean ministers. Last, I want to talk about how Jesus ministered to Mary and Martha when their brother Lazarus died. This is something my wife pointed out to me, and I thought it was really quite good, so I wanted to share it. Jesus already knew that Lazarus was dead before he even enters the city Bethany, and Jesus even knew that he would raise Lazarus from the dead. When he greets Martha, he tries to comfort her by saying their brother will rise again. But all this knowledge and perspective considered, when Jesus sees Mary weeping over her lost brother, we get verse 35, which says simply, Jesus wept. If anyone could have been sunshine and rainbows at this point, I think it was Jesus, but he is moved by his compassion for these women and their family, and seeing them in agony makes him want to groan within himself and cry with them. Part of our baptismal covenant is to mourn with those that mourn and comfort those that stand in need of comfort. But sometimes in the church we think when someone is sad, our job is to help them shrug it off because being unhappy or depressed is an undesirable or abnormal state. But we can see that Jesus was the type of person who would cry with his friends and try to put himself in their shoes and just be with them if they were feeling bad. Mary and Martha didn't need someone to try and brush off their sorrow. They needed a real minister who could understand what they felt and come to where they were emotionally and spiritually. Empathy is one of the keys to ministering. With empathy, we can change a person's life and in the end make their burdens much lighter than if we had just tried to fix them. So I hope that you've enjoyed this video. I've certainly enjoyed making it. I think we should use the Savior as an example for our ministering because he really was a master minister and the greatest of us all.